Hey everyone, today I'm going to be going over new items in Phase 5 of TBC Classic for Prot Paladins. I'm going to be talking about items for geared Prot Paladins as well as undergeared Prot Pallies. Any items that overlap, I will talk about in each section, so you only need to watch the section that actually pertains to you. I'm also going to be going over Wrath and Prepatch leveling sets, since now is the time you want to start collecting the gear for that. We'll go over what changes are going to affect what kind of gear you're going to want to wear, what you're going to want to be picking up along the way. I'm also going to give you week 1 sets and potential BIS sets for each individual Sunwell boss. If you'd like to support what I do, the easiest way is just liking and subscribing. I also have a donation link in my video descriptions, but I really appreciate all of you guys. Thank you for all your support. In Phase 5, new items come from a bunch of different sources. The Isle of quel'danas is a new zone added in Phase 5 that contains a new dungeon called Magister's Terrace, a new reputation called the Shattered Sun Offensive, and a new raid, Sunwell. There are also new Badge of Justice items that are unlocked through the progression of the Isle. As your server completes daily quests, new things will be unlocked. These should be unlocked extremely quickly on mega servers. There's also a new item exchange system where certain items that drop in Sunwell can be exchanged along with a sunmote for a different item. For example, Helm of Uther's Resolve does not drop off a boss. You need to get Helm of Burning Righteousness, a Holy Pally helm that drops off Kil'jaeden, and exchange that with a sunmote with Irma, an NPC found on the boat in the northern part of the Isle of quel'danas. Now let's go over new items for geared Prot Pallies, starting with helms. This is a good time to mention a new metagem that's available, the Eternal Earthstorm Diamond. This gem replaces the powerful Earthstorm Diamond and is the new go-to meta for Prot Pallies. It is obtained from Shattered Sun Offensive Revered. As far as helms, the top overall choice is going to be Helm of Uther's Resolve, obtained by trading Helm of Burning Righteousness, a Kil'jaeden drop plus a sunmote to Irma. There's also Crown of Dathramar, which is good for situations where you want to be a bit tankier, such as Brutallus. This is obtained from trading Crown of Anasterion, a Kil'jaeden drop plus a sunmote to Irma. Ideally, you'll get both of these helms and swap between them depending on the situation, but I would prioritize Uther's first. New engineering goggles are also available, hard corium goggles. I'd only use these in a super tanky set like for Brutallus, but they seem worse than Uther's, Crown, and Faceplate of the Impenetrable for survivability, so I'd only bother picking up this helm if you don't have any of those three. On to necks. Collar of the Pitlord is great for bosses and drops off Brutallus. Since we no longer have to focus on being uncrushable in Sunwell, huge stam pieces like this are even better than before. Expertise is also a strong single target threat stat. I'm planning to wear this neck on most things in Sunwell. Shattered Sun Pendant of Acumen is a new neck from Shattered Sun Offensive Exalted. This neck is interesting because it has a proc, but the proc is different depending on whether you're exalted with Aldor or Scryer. The proc chance is 15% with a 45-second internal cooldown. The Aldor proc is 120 spell damage for 10 seconds, and the Scryer proc is 333 to 367 arcane damage, and that's single target. The Aldor neck is great for trash, but I wouldn't bother with the Scryer neck. There's also a tank version of this neck, the Shattered Sun Pendant of Resolve, that has a 100 dodge Aldor proc and 100 expertise Scryer proc. I don't think either version of this neck is worthwhile for geared prots in Sunwell. The new Season 4 PvP neck, Guardian's Pendant of Dominance, is a great trash threat neck option for Scryers who won't have access to the better version of Shattered Sun Pendant of Acumen. Amulet of Unfettered Magics is a good boss threat neck, but it has spell haste and is much better for other people in your raid. I would pass on this and just go with Collar of the Pitlord. Now on to shoulders. The Spalders of the Thalassian Defender are the best overall shoulders, and you get them by trading Spalders of the Thalassian Savior plus a sunmote to Irma. Pauldrons of Perseverance are a tankier option you can use anytime you need more survivability, and they drop off Eredar Twins. Now cloaks. Crimson Paragon's cover is the best new option for bosses and drops off Eredar Twins. There's also the Tattered Cape of Antonidas for trash, but this cloak has a lot of spell haste and is way better for other people in your raid. This is only something you'd take in a GD KP, and even then, I wouldn't really bother since it has a very short shelf life with the pre-patch changes. Next, we have chests. Heroic Judicator's chest card is the best overall option and drops off Muru. There's also a new chest from Badges of Justice, Shatrath Protector's Breastplate. This is a fantastic threat chest, but everything in Sunwell hits so hard that it's going to be hard to find times to use this early on. Bracers are a really easy one. The Lightbringer wrist guards are the go-to, and they'll allow you to maintain your 4-piece Tier 6 bonus even after replacing some of your Tier 6 with new Sunwell gear. You'll use these for pretty much everything. The Bracer token drops off Kalecgos and Eredar Twins. New weapon options are lackluster for us in Phase 5. The only two new options are Brutal Gladiator's Gavel and Reign of Misery. Brutal Gladiator's Gavel surprisingly sims 3 to 8 threat per second worse in Emrys's sheet than Tempest of Chaos, depending on gear and buffs for a single target. Brutal Gladiator's Gavel does outperform Tempest for multi-target situations, and if you can actually benefit from the rezill on it, it can outperform Tempest given the gear swaps that can be made. Reign of Misery is slightly better than Tempest for AoE trash, but don't take it over anyone else who needs it. It's a really tiny min-max play for trash. As far as shields, we have two new options. Swordbreaker's Bulwark will be the best overall shield and drops off Felmyst. You can potentially use the Brutal Gladiator's Barrier for trash, especially if you are using a set where you actually benefit from the resilience. Now on to gloves. We only get one new option, Borderland Fortress Grips, which drop off Felmyst. These are pure survivability gloves for any time you need to be extra tanky. I'd continue to use tier 6 for most things, but these are great specifically for things like Brutallus. Belt is another easy one. The Lightbringer Waistguard is the go-to. The belt token drops off of Brutallus and Eredar Twins. You'll use this for pretty much everything. There are two new leg options, Judicator's Legguards that drop off Kalecgos and Fell Strength leg plates that drop off Brutallus. Judicator's Legguards are the best overall option as you'll get plenty of expertise elsewhere to reach soft cap. For boots, we have two new options. The first one is the Lightbringer Stompers. The token drops off Felmyst and Eredar Twins, and blue's Greaves of the Righteous Guardian, which are from badges. Lightbringer Stompers will be used a lot, but you may be able to fit blues into some sets down the line once you're more geared and more experienced with some of the fights in Sunwell. For rings, we have a bunch of new options. Ring of Hardened Resolve is the best of the bunch and drops off Muru. This ring is fantastic all around. It has extremely high survivability stats as well as some expertise for threat. Ring of the Stalwart Protector is a new Badge of Justice ring that will replace the Karazhan Exalted ring when you need to be tankier, which is most of the time in Sunwell. We also get two new threat ring options. Fused Nethergon Band is amazing for boss threat if you've already met the survivability requirements for the fight and are looking to add some threat. This ring comes from Badges of Justice, so it's extremely easy to get. Loop of Forge Power is another new threat ring that is BOE and made by Jewel Crafters. You generally aren't going to be using two threat rings in Sunwell, so this is pretty low priority to get. Between the two new pure threat rings, Nethergon clearly wins out. And finally, trinkets. Commendation of Kil'jaeden is a new trinket that drops off Priestess Delrissa in Heroic Magister's Terrace. On top of being the highest AM trinket in the game, it also has a proc that gives you 152 dodge rating, which is 8.03% dodge for 10 seconds anytime a melee attack brings you below 35% HP, and that's on a 30-second cooldown. This trinket is extremely good for survivability. Of course, the times you're most likely to die are when you get hit while you're below 35% HP, and this trinket just reduces the chance of that happening. Try to get this as soon as possible as it will be extremely good for Brutallus. Steely Naru Sliver is a new trinket that has a ton of expertise and an on-use HP pop. I don't think this trinket is worthwhile because you'll get plenty of expertise to soft cap from other pieces, so the expertise on this will likely only be affecting parry and not both dodge and parry, significantly lowering its value. If you're going for a threat trinket, you'd want to use Hex Shrunken Head, and if you want an HP pop, you'd just use Shadow Moon Insignia. Just as a note, there are no new Librams in Phase 5, so whatever you have now is what you're going to be using. Now I'm going to be talking about new Phase 5 gear for Undergeared Prot Pallies. This is for Pallies that aren't quite ready for Sunwell but want to gear up as much as possible outside of Sunwell. It really depends on what gear you already have, how well some of these pieces will fit into your set, but I'll try to give some general guidance to help you decide. First off, we'll start with Helm. If you're an engineer, you can get the Hardcorium goggles. The recipe drops in Sunwell, but it's BOE and the market will likely be flooded with these pretty quickly, so it should be easy to get fairly early in Phase 5. These are primarily used in situations where you need to be really tanky, things like Brutallus, Illidan, Asgalor, or Archimonde. This is replaced for its purpose by some Sunwell items, as well as Faceplate of the Impenetrable from Illidan. If you don't have Faceplate, this is a good pickup for times you need to be tankier. I'd wear Tier 5 or Tier 6 helm for most things if you have them, but even if you have those helms, this will be useful to have when you do need that extra tankiness. Let's now look at necks. The Guardian's Pendant of Dominance is from Honor, and it's a fantastic threat neck, particularly for trash. As an Undergeared Prot, you'll likely be doing a lot of trash tanking, and this neck will help you reach crit cap while also providing a lot of spell power. From the new Shattered Sun Offensive rep, there are 2 new necks available at Exalted. These necks have procs, and it depends on whether you're Exalted with Aldor or Scryer what the proc will be. The procs are all a 15% chance and have a 45-second cooldown. The Shattered Sun Pendant of Acumen is a threat neck with a 120 spell power for 10 seconds Aldor proc and a 333 to 367 arcane damage Scryer proc. The Aldor proc is significantly better than the Scryer proc. If you're Aldor, I'd use this neck over Guardian's Pendant of Dominance, but if you're Scryer, I'd just use the Guardian's Pendant of Dominance. There's also a tankier neck option, Shattered Sun Pendant of Resolve. The Aldor proc is 100 dodge rating for 10 seconds, which is about 5.28% dodge, while the Scryer proc is 100 expertise rating, which is about 6.25% reduced parry and dodge. Guardian's Pendant of Dominance is 9 less stam and quite a bit more threat if you're Scryer and way more threat if you're Aldor, so I would use Guardians if you have it. The dodge proc is really pretty inconsequential. If you don't have Guardians, then Shattered Sun Pendant of Resolve is a decent option for times that you might need a bit more stam if you don't have a good pure tanky neck that you could use. On to cloaks. Cloak of the Betrayed drops off Priestess Delris and Magister's Terrace. It's a decent starter boss threat cloak, but replaced by Ruby Drape of the Mysticant and Karazhan. Cloak of Blade Turning drops off Kale and Heroic Magister's Terrace. This is a pretty good tanky cloak for a newer Prot. You may be having trouble becoming crit immune early on, and the Rezel on this will help with that. We'll replace this with Slick's Cloak of Placation from Badges of Justice or Gilded Thorium Cloak from Ilhoof and Karazhan. For chests, there are 2 new options from Badges of Justice. Shatrath Protectorate's Breastplate is the best pure threat chest in the game for bosses. If you already have Tier 6 chest or chest guard of the Stoic Guardian, this isn't a top priority to get, as those chests are better in more situations, but once you're out of stuff to get with badges, you could pick this up. Chestplate of Stoicism is a pure tanky chest, also from Badges. If you already have Tier 6 chest, this can be skipped. Chest guard of the Stoic Guardian will be better for a lot more things, but Stoicism is good to have for times you need to be extra tanky if you have extra badges to spend. For wrist, Guardian's Lamellar Bracers from Honor are great trash threat bracers, but these do require a 1575 arena rating. If you already have the Seeker's wrist guards, you can skip these, but they're good to have if you have something worse than that. Now on to weapons. There are a ton of new weapon options. If you're willing to do a little bit of arena, you can get the Vengeful Gladiator's Gavel for only 1,250 arena points. That really isn't too difficult to get, even if you're just getting the minimum arena points or close to that every week. This weapon is only replaced by Tempest of Chaos or Brutal Gladiator's Gavel. Also from PvP, you could get the Merciless Gladiator's Gavel from Honor. This is replaced by Hammer of Judgment from Hyjal Trash. If you already have Amani Punisher, Cudgel of Consecration, or Fang of the Leviathan, I wouldn't bother farming the honor for it, and instead focus on other things. The aforementioned Cudgel of Consecration drops off Kale in Heroic Magister's Terrace. It's better than Bloodmaw Magus Blade from Gruul, but worse than Amani Punisher from ZA. Seeker's Gavel is from Shattered Sun Offensive Revered. It's the best blue weapon you can get if you're a fresh 70, and the Shattered Sun Offensive rep is pretty easy to get just by doing your dailies every day. This weapon will be replaced very quickly, but if you have nothing better by the time you get Shattered Sun Offensive Revered, you can pick this up. As for shields, there are a few new options. If you're willing to do some arena, Brutal Gladiator's Barrier is 1,750 arena points and has no rating requirement. The only shields better than this situationally are Swordbreaker's Bulwark from Sunwell and Bulwark of Azzinoth from Illidan. For pure threat, Antonidas' Aegis of Rapt Concentration is slightly better, but you'd likely rather have about 400 more armor and 12 stam after factoring in talents and buffs over 2 spell damage and some spell crit in almost any situation. Vengeful Gladiator's Barrier is only 750 arena points if you're trying to gear up more quickly. The only shields better than this are Bulwark of Azzinoth from Illidan and Aegis of Rapt Concentration from Archimonde. Another PvP shield is Merciless Gladiator's Barrier. This can now be obtained from Honor and is good enough to get you into BT and Hyjal. So this is an even quicker option if you don't already have an Illidari Rune Shield or a Bulwark of the Amani Empire. Sunward Crest is a new shield from Shattered Sun Offensive Exalted. Just something to pick up if you happen to reach Exalted before getting anything better. It's a little bit better threat shield than Aldurai Legacy Defender, but at the cost of some defensive stats. If you already have at least Aldurai, you could still pick this up for times you want a little more threat, but if you have anything worse than Aldurai, I would use this for pretty much everything. On to belts. Girdle of the Fearless is a new belt from Badges of Justice. I would just skip this one and go for Girdle of the Protector that is also from Badges, came out in Phase 4. It's just a much better itemized belt. Next, we've got legs. The inscribed leg plates of the Aldor are probably the most exciting new piece for less geared prot pallies. These are very close to the tier 6 legs, just without the set bonus, and you can buy them with badges. This would be my top priority to get of the new pieces if you don't already have tier 6 legs. These are great all around for just about any situation. Now for boots. Blue's Greaves of the Righteous Guardian are really strong new boss threat boots available from badges. I'd pick these up after the inscribed leg plates of the Aldor. They're the best tanky threat boots in the game. Tidestomper's Greaves are useful in more situations, but if you don't have those, you'll likely get a lot of use out of blues. If you already have the Sabatons of the Righteous Defender, I'd wait to get these till you've gotten some of the more pressing badge pieces. Next, we've got rings. Fused Nethergone Band is the best boss threat ring in the game, and it comes from badges. Combine this with Ashen's Gift from Cenarian Expedition, and you have 2 amazing threat rings. Early on, survivability will be a bigger concern for you than threat, so pick up the necessary survivability pieces first, and then you can look at this ring. Loop of Forge Power is a new BOE boss threat ring made by Jewel Crafters, and it's slightly better than Ashen's. It may be worth getting depending on the price, but keep in mind spell power rings will be pretty bad once pre-patch hits. There are also a couple new tanky rings available. Ring of the Stalwart Protector is from badges and is situationally the second best tanky ring in the game. You can use this with the Karazhan Exalted ring for situations you need to be extra tanky. I'd pick this up after inscribed leg plates of the Aldor and Blue's Greaves of the Righteous Guardian. There's also a new ring from Magister's Terrace called Band of Determination. This is a pretty good tanky ring for a brand new prot pally and also has a little bit of single target threat from Expertise. If you already have other bonus armor rings, you don't need this. And finally, we've got trinkets. Commendation of Kalecgos is from Heroic Magister's Terrace, and this is an extremely important pickup. Geared prots and undergeared prots alike will be using this a ton. On top of being the highest stam trinket in the game, it also has a proc that gives you 152 dodge rating, which is 8.03% dodge for 10 seconds anytime a melee attack brings you below 35% HP on a 30-second cooldown. This trinket is extremely good for survivability. Of course, the times you're most likely to die are when you get hit while you're below 35% HP, and this trinket reduces the chance of that happening. If you're an alchemist or a jewel crafter, there are some new exclusive trinkets available. Jewel crafting is an extremely good profession for Wrath of the Lich King, so if you're planning to play Wrath Classic and you're an undergeared prop pally, you may consider going jewel crafting now to both help you gear now and be more optimized for Wrath. Jewel crafters can get the Empyrean Tortoise recipe from Shattered Sun Offensive Revered. This trinket is really strong for newer prop pallies since you'll likely have survivability issues and trouble reaching both uncrittable and uncrushable. It also gives you a nice dodge on use to further help your survivability. Crimson Serpent is another new jewel crafting only trinket that's extremely good for less geared prop pallies. This trinket provides a ton of stam as well as a spell power on use. I recommend getting this as soon as possible if you're a fresh 70 prop pally and a jewel crafter. If you happen to be an alchemist, there are two alchemy exclusive trinkets available for prop pallies. The Guardian's Alchemist Stone has a ton of defense, so it's quite good for less geared prots and their quest to reach uncrushable. The Sorcerer's Alchemist Stone is solid for threat for a brand new prop pally, but replaceable by things like Icon of the Silver Crescent, Hex Shrunken Head, Tome of Fiery Redemption, and Eye of Magtheridon. Both of the alchemy trinkets require Shattered Sun Offensive Exalted. Alright, so now let's talk about some Wrath of the Lich King gearing. Once the Wrath Prepatch hits, prop pallies will undergo a ton of changes. For gearing, the most notable change is that we replace spell power with strength as our primary threat stat. This is because of both new scaling formulas for our abilities as well as a new talent, Touched by the Light, that converts 60% of our strength to spell power. The breakdown of how strength affects all of our abilities before multipliers is as follows. 1 strength equals 2 attack power, 0.6 spell power, and 0.5 block value. Consecration, Holy Shield, Judgment, and Seal of Vengeance damage over time scale equally with attack power and spell power. Hammer of the Righteous scales with weapon DPS, which means weapon upgrades and also attack power will increase it. Shield of Righteousness scales with block value. Seal of Command as well as Seal of Vengeance instant damage, which happens when procs occur after a 5 stack of the dot has been reached, scale with weapon damage, which AP will increase. Note that this damage will be higher with slower weapons, so they are preferred as long as DPS is the same as other options. So you can see that strength affects everything we do, while spell power on its own is only partially effective. Luckily, any gear made specifically for prop pallies is updated in the Prepatch. These changes remove spell power from prop pally pieces and add strength instead. Some of the other stats are also tweaked slightly on some pieces. Any item that has block value will be buffed to have significantly more block value. Wrath also introduces diminishing returns on dodge, parry, and miss. So the amount of dodge, parry, and miss you see on your character sheet is quite a bit higher than the actual chance of you avoiding an attack. Crushing blows are now dealt by mobs 4 levels higher than character level instead of 3 levels. This means bosses can no longer crush, so uncrushable is no longer something you gear for. All TBC raid boss damage and HP is nerfed in the Prepatch as well. As long as you have TBC gear made for prop pallies, it will all convert into good Prepatch gear. The things you'll want to focus on getting outside of that are either good tanky rings, cloaks, and necks, or ones with strength. You also want a high DPS weapon that is ideally slow attack speed. Nothing will be doing very much damage to you in Prepatch due to the nerfs, as well as having significantly more block value on top of having a cheat death and a shield wall. So I wouldn't go for a defensive statted lower DPS weapon like the Unbreakable Will. I'd go for the highest DPS weapon possible so you can pump some extra damage, since survivability will not be an issue. If you have a choice of multiple weapons with the same DPS, pick the slower weapon. Ideally, you'll have either Muramasa or a 2.6 speed Brutal Gladiator weapon by Prepatch. I'll have more detailed info on leveling sets once Wrath Beta is out and we're able to see how some leveling strats play out. But one thing I'm interested in trying is a max passive avoidance set with high block value so I can dungeon spam with 4 DPS. This would require a ton of block rating due to the new diminishing returns on parry, miss, and dodge, so hang on to block rating pieces in case this becomes the meta. Now let's look at gearing for each boss in Sunwell. You'll probably gear a little bit differently for each boss, and there aren't very many of them. So I think it's better to just go boss by boss rather than having a general mitigation, balanced, or threat set. Keep in mind the only boss in Sunwell that can crush is Lady Sacrolash, one of the Eredar Twins. In the Bis sets, you can choose to become even tankier, or you can pick up some extra spell power and maintain similar tankiness to your week 1 set. If going tankier will allow you to drop a healer, that's definitely the play. If your gear choice won't affect how many healers you bring, it'll be up to you how you want to gear this based on your specific situation. You may find that threat becomes more of an issue on some of these fights once your DPS are getting decked out in Sunwell gear, so the extra spell power might be important. And if you have no survivability issues by the time you have Bis gear, you might as well just use more spell power. This is really going to vary guild by guild, and it's up to you what makes the most sense for your specific situation. You can gem and enchant these sets any way you see fit for your situation. Full solids, solids plus glowings, and solids plus ruined are all fine. First, let's look at Kalecgos. I'd go very tanky for this for week 1 regardless of strat you choose, as threat isn't much of an issue and tank damage can be high. If you solo tank, you have about 3 minutes to kill Kalecgos and Sathravar before human Kalecgos dies. Maintaining debuffs on Sathravar will give you some extra time. You'll want to bubble when your arcane buffet stacks get around 10. You may be able to go a little bit higher. You'll figure out pretty quickly what is safe for you. Another strat is the 2-tank strat, where the tanks will rotate between who's tanking Kalecgos and who's tanking Sathravar. Kalecgos is going to deal fairly high melee damage. He's going to use a breath ability that does quite a bit of damage, and he's going to do a ramping arcane buffet. So every 8 seconds he'll cast arcane buffet. It'll increase your arcane damage taken by 500 each time. So as the stacks get higher on that, it's going to do more and more damage. When arcane buffet coincides with melee attacks and breaths, obviously there's quite a bit of burst potential there. So save CDs for the times when arcane buffet's higher on stacks. I like the violet badge for this fight, especially if you're solo tanking, because it will increase your chance of resisting arcane buffet to 17% with Mark of the Wild. Next up, Brutallus. Here you'll use a tankier set than you've ever used before for week 1. Brutallus dual wields and has a 1-second attack speed on both hands. He also has an ability called Stomp that deals physical damage and reduces armor by 50% for 10 seconds. You can really reduce the damage taken by having whichever tank is not currently tanking taunt right before a Stomp to get the debuff, and then the other tank taunts back immediately. He also casts Meteor Slash, which is a fire damage cleave that splits damage among anyone hit by it and gives a debuff that increases fire damage taken. You don't want this to get up to 4 stacks or people are going to start dying. If you can get the commendation of Kalecgos from Heroic Magister's Terrace early, that will help you a lot in this fight. I recommend Prot for this fight regardless of external sank. Threat isn't much of an issue here, as you get to seal your Feral Druid's threat with Taunt, and you get a ton of Holy Shield threat due to how fast Brutallus attacks. You can also spam Blessing for extra threat. Watch the threat meter closely, and you can swap from a spell power weapon to a defensive statted weapon, such as the Unbreakable Will, once a threat lead is established. In my PTR kill, I tanked the majority of this fight with about 100 spell power and had no threat issues. Your week 1 set for this should have tons of HP, armor, avoidance, and even block value. Block value is deceptively good for this fight since Brutallus attacks with 2 weapons and one of the weapons is significantly weaker, so block value reduces a very high percent of that damage. It's also helpful for his main hit attacks too, but it's extra beneficial due to the fact that it does have an attack that hits quite a bit weaker than the other one. Tome of the Lightbringer is really good for this fight, and Improved Judgment will help increase the uptime on that. In your BIS set, you'll likely want to just go even tankier, though you could maintain week 1 tankiness and add a ton of threat if needed. Elixir of Major Agi plus Elixir of Major Defense seems slightly better than Flask of Fortification for this fight. For Felmyst, your gear is really going to depend on the strat you use. The main ability you need to be aware of for this fight is Corrosion. It deals about 10,000 nature damage to the tank and puts a debuff on them, making them take 100% more damage for 10 seconds. If you're solo tanking, you need to have 20,000 plus HP so you can survive Corrosion plus a melee attack combo. In Phase 2, there are lots of skeleton adds to be AoE tanked. You can handle these just fine in a tanky solo tank set. Threat's really not going to be too much of an issue. These can survive for quite a while without many problems. But if you're not going to be tanking Felmyst and just tanking the adds, a high spell power set with good block value would be ideal. Solo tank is the strat I recommend. In the BIS set, you should be fine just maintaining your week 1 survivability and just picking up more threat, but you can go a little bit tankier if you'd like. For Eredar Twins, you'll gear quite a bit differently depending on your role. Sacrilege dual wields and is the only boss in Sunwell that can crush. She also casts a disorient on the main tank, so an off tank needs to be second on threat. Alethess casts Blaze pretty much non-stop, but will occasionally melee between casts if you're close. Each Blaze will leave a patch of fire on the ground. Alethess's fire damage cannot be resisted. For week 1, if you're the main tank on Sacrilege, I recommend a Sunwell Uncrush set. Your threat will be totally fine with all of the extra Holy Shield threat from her dual wielding. If you're off tanking on Sacrilege, I'd wear as much spell hit and spell power as you can get away with, so you can maintain number 2 on threat despite not being hit very much and therefore not getting to take full advantage of the extra Holy Shield threat. If you're tanking Alethess, I'd wear a lot of spell power and spell hit gear along with a bit of stam. For BIS sets, just gear the same way, but just with better pieces. I didn't get a chance to check out Muru on PTR, and I have no private server experience, so take these sets with a grain of salt. I haven't actually gotten to experience this fight yet. These sets are just theory crafted based on logs and streams that I've looked at. There are a few ways prop pallies can be used on this fight. In Phase 1, Muru is not tanked. Instead, adds periodically spawn. Void Sentinels spawn 1 at a time randomly along the sides of the room, and 2 packs of 3 Blood Elves spawn periodically. 1 at the door you enter the room from, and 1 on the opposite side of the door. You could be tanking Void Sentinels who hit really hard and spawn a bunch of small voids when they die that need to be AoE'd down. You may also tank some or all of the Blood Elves. My plan right now is to run a really tanky set as Deep Prot with an external sank and tank all 6 Blood Elves. If you're tanking the Blood Elves, it seems to work well to lean more into avoidance and block value while maintaining good spell power for threat. If you're tanking Void Sentinels, you'll want more effective HP. When Phase 2 starts, adds will stop spawning and Entropius will spawn and need to be tanked. He hits pretty hard and there will be a ton of raid damage happening at the same time. Finally, we've got Kil'jaeden. This is the only other fight I didn't get a chance to try on PTR, so also take these sets with a grain of salt. Kil'jaeden will spam Soulflay on the main tank for 3000 shadow damage per second. He will occasionally melee, but it's very weak. He will also target a raid member for Sinister Reflections, which will spawn 4 adds based on the class of the target. Each class will both melee and use class-specific abilities. As a prop pally, you will likely be tanking these adds. A set with high block value, block rating, and spell power should be good for this. 2-minute cooldown on use trinkets are very strong because they should line up for every Sinister Reflection. As far as for a BIS set, most Sunwell pieces have block value and spell power, which seems like they'll be really strong for this. Alright, I think that pretty much covers everything. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.